Hey mates, welcome to Loose Carry. I'm your host, Phoenix Trinidad, and if you are new here, this is Zero Tackle's weekly NRL podcast where we talk about all things rugby league. And this episode, of course, we are wrapping up all the action from Game 2 of State of Origin. We talk about the weird penalty call count and all the changes that we should be seeing for Game 3. There's also some contract news for Selwyn Cobbo and Tallyn Silva, and we go through all the action from round 16. So, let's get into it. Alrighty, and this week we have the usual crew, I'll say. So first up, Darren Parkin, how are you, mate?
Yeah, my voice is not in super shape, but I'm battling through. Obviously, Origin series alive at 1-1 and some thrilling results on the weekend as well.
Absolutely. Good thing you're not on a podcast and you don't have to talk for a living. Next one is Lee Addison. How are you, buddy?
Good, thank you. I thought there were some great games this weekend. A lot of close matches, a couple of upsets, I think, in terms of the betting margins, but also a golden point match in there too, which was quite thrilling. So, and another thing I've noticed is how many times the right side of defence was leaking. So I'd love to talk about that later, Phoenix.
We'll get onto that later on. And making his return, haven't seen you for a couple of weeks since we weren't let into a Storm game in Melbourne the other week. Retro Rugby League.
Phoenix, good to be here. Yes, those Victorians got a sniff of me coming back into the town and tried to keep me out for as long as possible. But we got there in the end. No, it was a great time being in Melbourne. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And shout out to your new favourite beer, Victoria Bitter. Not a sponsor, but
they did reach out in the comments. Yet to reach out though financially. So VB, get on board.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into it. All right, so it feels like it's been an eternity since Game 2 of State of Origin Retro, and unfortunately, your Blues did not get up.
No, they did not. I was hoping to get a clean sweep this year. I got my broom out and everything, but no, it didn't happen. Queensland had their great moments playing well. New South Wales had some absolutely shocking moments in the first half. And yes, the penalty count didn't help, but Ashley Klein wasn't stopping New South Wales missing tackles and things like that. So unfortunately, New South Wales kind of got what they probably deserved and didn't want in the end. The script writers, this is the big story, are the NRL script writers out and about, making sure that we get a decider for all that revenue, and certainly will lead to an exciting Game 3. But I think it was just a game of missed opportunities and missed conversions, all those things that New South Wales will rue. Darren, how do you see it play out?
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting outplayed, you would expect an imbalance in most statistics, but obviously 8-0 at halftime was probably a bit more drastic than it seemed. But I'd be keen to see what they do now. Obviously, Queensland, when they lost the first match, it was quite stark, the performance, and you felt like they had to change things around, whereas New South Wales regained momentum in the second half, were playing well again. They had a bit of a run on Lee, and then obviously missed a few chances to pinch the result. Do you think the message for New South Wales, I know there's some speculation around changes, but hold your line. You've played a pretty average 40 minutes, but apart from that, you've had things working largely the way you would expect, and going back home, just try not to blink too much and maybe back yourselves to get it done?
Out of the 4 halves of football that have been played, New South Wales have dominated 3 of them.
Yeah,
I think it's a real shame that what we've had to talk about after the game is the refereeing, and I actually turned the game off at halftime. I've never ever done that with Origin before because of the officiating. It was that clear to me that it was a one-sided refereeing scenario, and I was very interested in Scott Pryde's article last week where he said that in 9 of the last 10 Origin Game 2s, the team losing Game 1 have won the Game 2 penalty count in the first half, and also 7 of the last 10 Origins, the team losing Game 1 have won the overall penalty count. So, to use his words, if it quacks like a duck, waddles like a duck, it probably is a duck, and I think DCE would have looked good for Queensland with all those penalties. So, and unfortunately, it takes it away from what Queensland did better. Queensland played more direct. Queensland played more percentages. Queensland focused on how hard they ran, how hard they tackled, rather than trying to play an NRL brand of football. New South Wales, though, easily turned it around in the second half. And if Zach Lomax brought his kicking boots, then they would have won game 2 as well. So I think it's actually Queensland who have put a little bit of sticky tape and plaster over their wound right now, if I'm honest.
I think that's a great assessment. I don't think there's any Queenslander coming out of that game who is thoroughly confident walking into game 3. There's nothing I don't think they've seen in game 1 or 2 that gives them this real air of like, yep, we're going to do this. They can do it, but not that they are going to do it. And you're exactly right, Lee. New South Wales just turned it on the second half, thoroughly dominant. You know, if Stefano Udukamanu hadn't have been as nice and hadn't have tried to step back out of the way and just stood his ground, that try to Nathan Cleary's probably allowed. So
I think it also brings up another point, and I tweeted this, X'd it, whatever you call it now, at the time. Stefano didn't even see the defender behind him. He was simply trying to get out of the way of Cleary. And again, that was something else that ruined the game. I mean, Nathan Cleary didn't have a fantastic game, but when he ran the football, he was as good as some props. He was probably better at Stefano going forward, actually. But that try really annoyed me too, and led to me thinking about turning off the show at half-time.
Darren, you might know the answer to this. Question marks about Cleary's health. Obviously didn't play on the weekend, not a big surprise, but that quad injury that prevented him doing kicking in the first half, he kind of just gritted his teeth and did it in the second half. There's questions over whether he will play. What are you hearing there?
And then obviously Penrith didn't back up any of their players really at all following that. But yeah, you kind of feel like with him that he's carrying something most of the time, and he finds a way to get to the line. And I kind of sense that he'd probably be in that position. But so I reckon he'll play. But for both of you, in terms of Billy Slater, I think most of us would recognise in the light of day that New South Wales appear at this point to have a deeper, stronger squad. They've had more control of it. He pulled several reins coming out of game 1 that obviously worked. He got the result they wanted. They kept the series alive. They started well with momentum, and all of these players did their job. If they lose game 3 but are competitive, how do we assess him at the end of the series, thinking, well, pound for pound, New South Wales are better than Queensland? Has he done the best he possibly can with what he's got? Obviously, if he was to pull off the win, that's a remarkable endorsement for him. But do you think they assess it big picture around, we think New South Wales are stronger and you've given us every chance?
If you look at the history of Origin, it's actually Queensland who have won the most series. And if you look at the history of the statistics too, in terms of the amount of people that play the game in each state, New South Wales should win hands down every single series. So I think there should be some real introspection after this series if Queensland don't win it, because they appointed a coach who had no rugby league coaching experience. And quite frankly, he coached the first 2 series against Brad Fittler, and I don't think Brad Fittler can coach a pig to be dirty. And he got away with 2 there, and then all of a sudden he came up against Madge Maguire, who's a seasoned coach, and got schooled. And I think Laurie Daly, quite frankly, in 3 of the 4 halves that we've seen so far, has schooled him again. So I think that the Queensland Rugby League need to really look at this appointment and have a look at their pathways for coaches in general. You've opened a can of worms there, Darren.
I did hear an interview prior to game 1, I think, saying that Billy Slater's tenure at Queensland is safe, and that came from Ben Eichen. Now, he's a big Billy Slater fan. He's also not the only one who makes those decisions, so someone could go above him. I would think if he loses this series, he'll be given at least one more chance. I didn't really see anything really in game 2 that said, oh, wow, they've been coached so different into game 1. It's just they actually turned it on a little bit and took their opportunities. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him go around next year, regardless of what happens. But that doesn't mean they won't have a look.
Yeah, well, speaking of Slater, so that big gamble with DCE paid off. So what do we think about Ponga now? So would it be a gamble to take Ponga out? Has he done enough to stay in the team, especially with potentially Walsh coming in?
Yeah, he's been kind of a non-event. Not a non-event, but he's only really been a bit part player, Lee. And then you look at like Walsh and looked a bit sore, but still played very well for the Broncos. Do you think they pull the trigger or back him in again?
I think that, number one, they've had a win. Okay, so this whole thing, do you change a winning side? I think you do if you need to. That's my personal opinion. However, with Ponga had a great game at the weekend. He played really well. And I think that's because he had a forward pack that was going forward. Again, if you look at Queensland's game over the first two games, for 3 of the 4 halves, their pack hasn't really dominated the New South Wales pack. So it's very hard to get on the front foot for everybody when your pack isn't going forward. Now, when things were going well, just because Ponga didn't get that involved, I think that probably speaks more to the fact that Munster was good, Grant was good, and they really dominated New South Wales in so many areas that people were all scrambling to try and get hold of the ball, and I think the ball just missed Ponga at times, or he got it in the wrong places. So I don't see Ponga as the problem per se. I would have dropped him before this game, but I think right now, with captain hindsight here, I'm going to say no. Let's keep him in because I would like to see Reece Walsh on the bench actually.
Wow. That's a big inclusion. I think if I was the Broncos, I'd be feigning an injury around Reece Walsh to make sure he doesn't get picked for Queensland, so I can just keep him in my Broncos squad. I don't know. I think you just leave Kalyn Ponga. Like you're trying to build this cohesion. You're trying to build a squad, and you've done it for game 1, and you lost. You built it game 2, and you won. Take that with you. I mean, that's the question marks around New South Wales. If Cleary doesn't play, and people saying, throw in Luke Metcalf and whatever, get rid of Luai. No, cohesion is the most important thing you can have when you're playing in a very short series like this, and it's kind of largely instinct play and minor coaching and stuff. So I don't think you'll see him in the frame. Maybe 2026. We'll talk about Walsh, I think, more with the Broncos, but I think both teams will remain pretty unchanged.
Well, just staying with that, Retro, if you were to make any changes for Game 3, what can you see happening for the Blues?
I think they'd be pretty solid bar injury. That's the only things that I would change. Whether people think Stefano's done enough to earn his spot. Pardon me, Max King spent a lot of time on the bench too, but was that just because Spencer and Payne Haas were ripping and tearing and you wouldn't let him go? So I don't think they'll do much there bar forced changes, and I think probably pretty similar for Queensland.
Yep, I agree. Alrighty, so let's move on from Origin. Darren, just a quick one. We usually leave the contract talk to the end, but I think we should bring this up early. So Selwyn Cobbo, we've been speaking about him a lot. So the Broncos reportedly only have $300K to spend, which is quite interesting. He's had links to the Dragons and Cowboys. Should he leave the Broncos? What do you think?
Yeah, it's amazing where he was at, say, 6 or so weeks ago when we were talking about the Walsh injury and when he came in and how all of that was going. Obviously, form has been an issue. We've spoken a lot about the Broncos contracts and did someone have to be squeezed out? How much money would be left at the end? And I guess this is the answer, not much. I mean, he's on about $650, so you'd be looking at a very significant haircut to stay, so probably half his current contract. They've, from what we can gather, pre-season and now, they've sort of got in touch with his own local community in terms of figuring out how to, make him happy, make him comfortable, bring out the best in him and that type of thing. There's all sorts of options. He could walk away from the game. There's a mystery third club. They're staying in Queensland. There's New South Wales. But, yeah, it looks like when they've put all of the pegs in all of the holes, they're left with not much left, which we always thought would happen, Lee, and he might be the one that gets squeezed.
It must be a financial thing because the question would be, is he earning his 600,000 plus salary right now? And I would argue maybe not, but 6 weeks ago he probably was. And I think this is indicative of the fast news cycles and the short-term thought that many people apply to life these days and the clickbait, if you like. I think he can still add value to the Broncos for the rest of the year, and he can certainly turn the conversation the other way. But I do think that 600,000 figure is obviously a problem. So, and do not be surprised if there's some agents operating behind journalists here, just trying to get a big payday somewhere else, or Or conversely, the Broncos, they've appointed a new spin doctor in the last couple of weeks to manage their off-field issues. Maybe that's been leaking out. So I tend to take some of these things with a little bit of pinch of salt and just see how the cards fall. But yeah, I would have thought that the figure, I mean, the fact his wages came out, okay, just tells you somebody is leaking this stuff on purpose.
There was some talk about him having a chat with South Sydney. And in some ways, you could see him being a good fit there. I think in other ways, this might be too many cooks in the kitchen with similar players. Him playing like alongside Latrell and Jack Whiten and Jai Gray and all that kind of stuff. Tyrone Munro had a great game on the weekend. I don't think you'll see Selwyn Cobbo walk away from the game. I know he wanted to be a Bronco, but I think any rhetoric about that being a huge part of the deal is exactly what Lee's saying. That's drummed up by managers to make his dollar value rise because it's harder to pull him away from the Broncos. I think it just seems like the Broncos have chosen Kotoni Staggs over him, and that seems to me to be almost like a Michael Maguire decision, that he would prefer a Staggs type figure than a Cobbo, and Cobbo spent a bit of time on the bench. I think he's earned his keep in his versatility, be able to play centre, wing, and stepped in a fullback for a little while and looked okay. Yeah, I think he will land somewhere. Cowboys is interesting. I thought they kind of ruled him out of the equation. But yeah, we'll see where he lands.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be dramatic no matter where he goes. So let's get to the round 16 results. So Lee, we'll start with you. Raiders 16 over Tigers 12. They're just rolling along, comfortable in that second spot on the ladder. How did you find that one?
The first of the good games I was talking about. Now, it was also the first game that I picked up the vibe that the right side of defence was in trouble. So if you think about the attacking side of the ball, it's people passing the ball from right to left. Now, something like 85-86% of the world is right-handed, so it stands to reason that in the community game, for example, there's lots of tries on that side, but it jumped out in the NRL and in Origin this week, the right side of defence. On that right side was Heath Mason in the headgear number 6. And he at times wasn't even a speed bump. He wasn't even slowing the attackers down. He was falling off tackles, and also Sonny Taruva and Stafford Tower outside him weren't really helping matters. And then I think, from memory, Benji made a change and brought Latu Fainu on to partner Jerome Luai, and that sort of turned the game somewhat. I think both teams can take something from this. I think the Tigers have learnt something about themselves in terms of the way that right side leaked some defence when Heath Mason was on there, and then the difference that Latu Fainu made when he came on the field, Darren.
Yeah, a bit of resilience from the Tigers. I know they didn't get the result. Obviously, they almost got lifted over the line in the space of 5 minutes for a little burst there. Raiders going as well as anybody in the competition, so I don't think they would lose too many admirers from that. And yeah, it's probably where they're at. Retro, they're a more competitive outfit clearly than they've been in the past, but yeah, the Raiders keep finding ways to win regardless of the circumstances, and their draw suggests that they're going to be certainly top 4, possibly top 2, possibly minor premier.
They do, and Lee, you said one of the things that stood out to you was this right edge defence. The thing that stood out to me over the last couple of weeks is teams are just making it so hard for themselves to win. We'll talk about that with Melbourne in a second. Teams are just doing themselves dirty for no reason. And this was the Raiders. They're up pretty well 16-0 and were up significantly and almost let it slip to a Tigers outfit. Now, there's positives and negatives to take from there, and I think it shows that the Raiders do have some of the vulnerabilities and chinks in the armour, but are deservedly where they need to be because they're still just racking up those wins. I think in a game, in a way, it'll be a game they probably both, in some ways, like to forget, and in some aspects, they'll draw on for future weeks. Yeah, I don't know. There's just huge storylines to come out of it, though.
Yeah, I think we have this on the rundown of Benji Marshall being under pressure, but I feel like we talk about that. It's sort of flip-flops whenever, based on the results. So if the Tigers lose, he's under pressure. If they win, he's not under pressure.
This is like a kid in school who wasn't passing any exams getting a C. in an exam all of a sudden for West Tigers. They are 14th in the ladder or something. Their ears will be popping at that club. They've never been that high up the ladders in the last decade. So, I mean, nobody's been a bigger critic of Benji than I, but I can't fault what he's doing with that side. I mean, the West Tigers fans should be really happy with how they played in the second half and came back against a side that are up the top of the ladder. So, yeah, I don't think he's under any pressure at all.
Yeah, they've been winning between 4 and 6 games over the last 3 to 4 years. They're at 5 now. I think when we did the season preview, we said if they could have a double-figure win season, that would be a tremendous result. They're a chance to nail a 9 or 10 win campaign, which is sort of they've lost a few close games. So, yeah, I think they're making some progress.
Yeah, I think they're on track for just a net positive season all around by the end of the year. So, moving on to the next one, retro. So, unfortunately, my Warriors 18 to Panthers 28, and losing at home. So that was a pretty interesting one. And the Panthers, they are back in the 8.
Yeah, what a game for the Panthers. Hey, a lot of people said to me, who do you think is going to win this game? I thought, Warriors 13 plus. Panthers don't stand a chance to that. It's only, the young kids, no Origin stars backing up, it's not going to go anywhere for them. Well, I was wrong. And the young guys from Penrith, Brad Schneider probably had the game of his life. Blaze Talangi gave out the performance that everyone has been saying he could do. Jenkins on the wing, what a story from him. Jesse McLean's looking good. Moses Leota really took it to the fish. They really stood up and showed what they're about. Warriors didn't roll over and just die. It'd be a bit sad for a Warrior household to see that, but yeah, there's still good things for them there. It's not panic stations or anything, but what a game for from the Panthers. And I'll hand this over to Lee for a speculative point, because we've seen the Panthers and these young kids just go absolutely wild in the absence of Nathan Cleary. And there'd been talks beforehand that Cleary, was having to tone down his game because he was just too good for the squad. Now he's not there and they've let loose. Now, this is a very speculative point, Lee, but is there an angle that says that Cleary's star power or his creativity or his structure is choking the young hotness of that squad?
Because I'm a rugby league geek, I should be called retro rugby league geek when it comes to watching old YouTubes. I watched some Joey Johns last week and some highlights and a couple of full games. And I'm going to go as far as to say Nathan Cleary is about 10 or 20% off that as a footballer. Nathan Cleary has been part of a system. He's been part of a Penrith system that even when I was there back in the early part of the last decade, there was a halves academy in place. And he grew up around that area when his dad moved back to Sydney from the Warriors. And he has been part of the system alongside people like Jerome Luai, Dylan Edwards, etc. He's fantastic in that system. Whenever he's played for New South Wales, he's sometimes looked a little bit, I wouldn't go as far to say a fish out of water, but he's looked somewhat average at times. Some of his kicks haven't met the mark. His pass selection, his influence on the game, full stop. When he played for Australia, particularly in the last World Cup, looked very average until the semi-final. And then what he does to get back into form is just play a very simple game where he doesn't try any trick shots or anything like that. I'm going to go as far to say that I'm starting to form a picture in my head that Nathan Cleary is a system player. And take him out of that system and he starts to struggle somewhat. And that means that when he's not in that system, somebody else steps into the system and the system still functions. So I think there's a bit of a question mark about Nathan Cleary, because the media types, etc., were really quick to anoint him as the next immortal, not long after he left the womb. And he hasn't really... Can any of us sit here and say that he's really killed it at Origin?
No, not a Joey sense or a Cam Munster sense or anything.
Has he killed it in a Kangaroos jersey?
So no, it's certainly not in a stellar way to go, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's question marks over Cleary in my head, and it's going to be so controversial. If you snap this up and put it on the zero tackle TikTok and everywhere else, they'll be get that pommy out of Australia talk. But yeah, honestly, I think there's some serious question marks over his greatness, Darren.
Yeah, it's. I also pinpoint you mentioned system there, and that was the point I wanted to make out of the game. I mean, Penrith, yes, they were off a bit early in the season, but for them and the Storm and these powerful sides, it's about system. It's about you take one player out, you put one player in, and the machine just keeps chugging along. And that was really encouraging for them with the players out, that they were able to just keep humming like that. They put themselves in the mix, and if you're in the top 8 and you look over your shoulder and see Penrith, you're not going to rest comfortably until someone knocks them out. That's for sure. You're going to be nervous with their presence.
2 things for you, your Warriors, before we put this one to bed, Phoenix. Their right side again, defensively, Metcalf was falling off tackles like there was no tomorrow, which was a shock, actually. And another thing I heard from Bradley Fittler, no less, that it was the record for hyphenated surnames in an NRL game.
There you go.
7 of them, apparently. So the only one we've got here is Retro Rugby League. But, yeah, the hyphenated surnames, apparently it was a record for them. I bet you didn't have that statistic, did you, Darren?
I did not have that one, but I'm going to file that away for use somewhere else down the track.
Well, just going back to Cleary, I did see a really great video from one of the Warriors fans. I think it was during the curtain raiser. All the Panthers boys were watching the curtain raiser beforehand, and one of the Warriors fans was just trying to convince Nathan Cleary to do 1 year at the Warriors, and he turned around and smiled at the fans. So I think that's a good sign. So if he falls out of that Panthers side, he's more than welcome to come over to the Warriors for a year. Moving on now, Darren. Rabbitohs fell by 1 point. Gone to your Stormy boys. How did you find that one?
Yeah, I mean, the Bunnies obviously coming off a low base and probably should have won the game. Obviously, they had numerous chances to take it late. Latrell obviously missing a long-range opportunity right at the death, and then the Storm obviously reversing the magic round golden point loss they had to Canberra. But I think Retro summed it up before, that sides are getting in their own way a little bit, and the Storm have been a bit that way at times this year, relinquishing control of games, playing the odd burst here and there. But, I think if you ask who would be more proud of their efforts coming out of the game, obviously the Bunnies can hold their heads high, but they don't get the chocolates, which would frustrate them enormously, Retro. But they probably should have.
Yeah, the Storm are their own worst enemy at times. Like that game that we went to, Phoenix at the Cowboys, they're clearly in front, just let the Cowboys back in. This game, seemed like ticking the boxes early. This is just what we do. Letting Souths back in. Like, I don't know why they're doing it to themselves. They don't have to. Craig Bellamy is just blowing up Deluxe in the box. On paper, the Melbourne Storm, this should be their competition to lose, and they're just finding every way to make it much harder than it has to be. So I'm hoping for them and their fans' sake, coming out of Origin period, they just knuckle down and just get rid of the rot, because it just does not have to be this hard.
Absolutely. The stat for you on that was that the Storm this season have given up more double-figure point runs than they have in any of their last 5, and we're only 14 games in, and they've already gone past the number of the others. I mean, the fact they still sit in the top 3 is the silver lining out of all of that. So,
I think it would be frustrating if you are a Souths fan. However, I also at the same time think that Wayne Bennett is doing an amazing job with that side. They're second last on the ladder, and again, people will be asking for me to be deported from the country for saying this, but they've got so much starch in there now. That team would have folded a year ago and it would have been 50 to Melbourne. There was one example when Anderson of Melbourne was about to score on the left side of Melbourne's attack just before half-time. That would have probably put the game to bed. And Jai Arrow ran across. Jai Arrow had number 8 on his back, but I think he was playing right edge. He ran across and made a scrambling tackle and saved the try. And that's all you want from your football side. And I thought it was a great sign for South Sydney.
Yeah. Another positive for South. So, Retro, Alex Johnston is creeping ever closer to that tries record.
Yeah, the all-time tries record. So he scored 4 on the weekend, went from 202 to 206. Ken Irvine is the all-time try scorer and holder at 212. So he's only got 6 tries to go. And he could probably do that in 2 games if he wants to. So the petition going around at the moment is the NRL should allow fans to storm the field, a bit like Buddy Franklin when he hit the 1,000 goals, 1,000 points, 1,000 goals, wasn't it?
1,000 goals, yeah.
Yep. And let them all run on the field and give him a hug and whatever. I'm all for it. I just signed the petition before this game. I hate South Sydney, and I am all for it. From a marketing point of view, from keeping up with the AFL, I reckon it's got to happen. They've actually been given some lead time, to make it happen, so they can think about it a little bit. I think this has got to do it. So if you're listening to this and you have not yet, jump on change.org and sign that petition. Storm the field for Alex hitting 212 and rename that medal the Irvin Johnston medal.
Yeah, I'm signing that now. It's it's very much worthy. It's a great part of the game, but yeah, obviously that was a double hat trick to get 4, but I think 16 hat tricks. Lee, 56 times he scored 2 or more in a game. It's an incredible record. And yeah, he's going to be a well-deserved keeper of the record pretty soon.
I think it's amazing, and it's also amazing that the games he's played is not much different to Ken Irvine. It's going to be just a few more games, I think. And if you think about all the things that we like to say about rugby league in the modern era, that this has improved, that's improved, coaches are far better than they used to be, blah, blah, blah. Well, hang on a minute. A guy has scored this many tries against these so-called smart defences in the modern era, and he's only going to be a few games extra than Ken Irvine in decades of past, when apparently the game was a lot easier to play. So I think it's absolutely fantastic and cannot be underplayed.
And just back on that petition for all the fans, as the AFL guy, technically when Buddy Franklin did his 1,000 goals and the fans stormed the field, the AFL didn't technically approve it. So but there was a bit of a wink, nudge. They knew it was going to happen, but just so you know, you don't have to get the NRL's tick of approval. I'm
actually worried too that the bunker will intervene. So he scores the try, and then the bunker goes, hang on a minute, that wasn't a try. So what all the fans are going to do? Stand there waiting for the decision?
Oh, yeah, geez. Yeah. Oh, that'd be heartache, wouldn't it?
It's like, we'll just wait around here on the sidelines and give them a few minutes to get
either that or there'll be a riot if it's not given. Yeah.
This is the modern.
I'd absolutely love that.
The slightly modern version of the Storm Area 51 meme. They can't arrest all of us. They can't shoot all of us. They could. But yes, make it happen.
Make it happen, absolutely. Lee, your Broncos, 34 over the Sharks, 28. Real quickly, how did you find that one?
Game again. I worry for the Cronulla Sharks. I think they've had a premiership window, and I saw them incrementally improving every year, and now they're incrementally dropping down. So I do worry about them. Again, their middle defence to their right edge got absolutely tormented in the second half. In the first half, it was again the things had flipped. The big thing I take from this game, though, apart from the Sharks not being very good, is Adam Reynolds is playing in some form right now, probably bettered because he's agreed a contract. But also, I think Ezra Mam and Reece Walsh, Darren, add so much to that side.
Yeah, they do. And look, I think they were talking about Walsh pre-game looking a little bit ginger, but he had an enormous influence on what they were doing. We probably had similar conversations about both of these sides in terms of their shortcomings, where they've been very good at their best, very poor at their worst, sometimes in the same game. And I think for the Broncos, there's never been any question that their best form is good enough. That's just whether they can produce it often enough. I mean, they've come from 12-28 down. Reynolds and Walsh helping to drive them home from that point, which is, a credit to those guys. But the Sharks going to sleep again. It's been the story of their year, Retro.
Yeah, I just don't know why it's happening, why teams are just making it so hard on themselves. Sharks started all right, and then just dropped off. Broncos started poor and then clicked on. What? Just stop doing it to yourself. Just play better from the start or consistent from the start. I know it's easy to say from the sideline, but geez, that has make their lives hard sometimes. Broncos, and I agree with everything Lee has said. Ezra Mam has really added some spark back to that side. It's brought the life kind of back to the young guys, and Reece Walsh is having a good time. Reynolds is controlling the ship. Shout out to Sione Katoa, who gave away the dumbest 10 minutes on the bin of all time by reaching out from an offside position to try and ankle tap someone. I just can't think of a dumber play to get yourself sat down for 10 minutes. And then also shout out to Trindle, who had a bit of a spew on the field. Don't know what happened there. It seemed to be coming out of half-time or something, didn't it? Yeah, maybe.
We both run hard. Shout out to Walsh. I don't know how he got into that game. If you saw that footage from his warm-up, he was falling over after just trying to take off. That was incredible.
Coming off the PCL too, yeah.
Yeah. I just did not understand how he played through that game. So must have got a couple of big jabs. But retro quickly as well. Your Roosters absolutely smashing the Cowboys, who look just out of sorts.
Yeah, just totally shell-shocked. Anyway, from Chook's point of view, love to see it. And some of the surprise packets of the year really coming through. Nafua White's been great for the Roosters. Billy Smith is my new favourite Rooster. I love Billy Smith. He's just a good news story, just never given up. Mark Nawinga Tawase's just been awesome for them out on the edge. Spencer going hard. There's a lot of good news stories for those young Chooks. And, Lee, you were saying before, their score lines may have changed, but the ability to dominate a game is still there, and the Roosters thoroughly showed that on the weekend.
When I studied in depth the Queensland defence in Origin 1, there were two defenders that stood out to me as being absolutely shocking technique-wise. They were Jeremiah Nanai and Ruben Cotter. What club do they play for?
The Cowboys, or the Cowgirls at this rate.
And if you looked at those tries that they were conceding yesterday, the middle of the field fell off them like they were just jumped off them like they were on fire. They were in so much trouble in the middle of the field defensively, the Cowboys. I think Todd Payton, if we are talking about coaches under pressure, I mean, this side is underperforming something chronic.
Well, they've leaked 100 points in 2 weeks.
4 tries in 10 minutes.
Astronomical. Yeah. Also, shout out Teddy. Absolutely playing out of his skin at the moment. I'm loving the fact that he is not getting picked for New South Wales. Blues, please never pick him again.
Alrighty, and before we get to the preview, Darren, so just a little bit more contract on. So, Tallyn Silva could be leaving the Tigers before June 30.
It's interesting. Spent the whole game on the bench on the weekend, and you look at the Galvin stuff from earlier in the year, and they might lose another one before the end of this month, and potentially a loan deal that the Knights are understood to have shown a fair degree of interest in that. I think when they spoke to Benji after the game, and his answer was not sure. You can probably read into that what you will, but was questioned about why he wasn't brought off the bench. Clearly, he's an understudy. They've got some guys ahead of him that they're looking to re-sign retro, and it looks like he'll get the squeeze. Probably not the cultural hit, for want of a better expression, that say all the ripples that the Galvin one did where they released angry statements and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, it looks like he'll potentially follow suit.
Yeah, culturally not a good look. The whole talk was, will they be able to keep him and Galvin? Well, they haven't got Galvin. If they lose him too, it's a leaky boat pretty quick. I thought he made comments earlier in the year saying he was very happy at the Tigers and things were looking positive. And of course, Appy is ahead of him, and rightfully so. I'd like to see him stick around. Maybe is there looking at greener pastures in Newcastle? Doesn't really look like it, but I don't know. I would like him to stay. I think
they should channel what Melbourne did with Harry Grant, who ironically went on loan to the Tigers for a year because there was a guy called Cameron Smith in front of him. And they said to Harry Grant, we want to keep you, but we can't put you in the team next year because there's this future immortal in number 9. Now, I don't think Happy Coruscant is a future immortal, but he is 32 and De Silva is 20. So I think if they want to give De Silva some first grade experience, it would be a great idea to loan him out somewhere.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's get to the round 17 preview. Darren, what game are you looking forward to, mate?
Yeah, there's a few. Obviously, Penrith Bulldogs right off the bat, probably the one. Penrith right back in business against the benchmark of the competition. So I won't steal the thunder of the others, Retro, but can't go past the first for me.
Yes, this weekend is going to be full of cracker games. There's storylines all throughout. But for me, and I'll be going to this game, it is the Broncos and the Warriors. It is going to be a New Zealand takeover of Suncorp Stadium. The last time the Warriors played the Dolphins at home, not only did they outnumber the Dolphins probably like 5-1, the Dolphins got booed at Suncorp Stadium where they ran out because there's so many Warriors fans there. It is going to be hectic. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I'm like, Daz, I can't look past Thursday night. Now, you would think Panthers backing up after a trip to New Zealand on a Thursday to play those Dogs who have had a week off again. They are the Dogs of draw this year. They have had a belting draw. But the last time this happened, and this is linking the Broncos in too, the last time that the Bulldogs played a team that had just been to New Zealand and they played them on a Thursday was the Brisbane Broncos, and Brisbane Broncos put the cleaners through them. So I think that if there's one organisation that knows how to deal with the fallout from travelling to New Zealand, and there could be some players coming back, I think the Panthers could also put on the shock of the round on Thursday.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Loose Carry. Thanks for jumping on, fellas. We'll do the plugs. Lee, your book is back on display.
I'm going to let you do my plug this
Origin
week. So if you don't mind grabbing the book, Phoenix, because it's not quite in camera in camera there. It's called. Tell us what it's called, Phoenix.
It's called Rugby League Coach, 13 game-changing conversations to transform.
And it's the best book you've read this year, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can get it from me, rugbyleaguecoach.com.au.
Very authentic.
Or Amazon, places
Just
like
doing
that.
my contractual obligations to you, Lee. Retro Rugby League, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, and we've got a huge giveaway going on at the moment. So for people who join up with Retro Club, which is our subscription service on Instagram, you can win up to $2,000 worth of prizes, heaps of jerseys, new and old, player issued Broncos, new Cowboys, new Dog stuff, new Rabbitohs stuff, heaps. Get around it.
Absolutely love it. And of course, you'll see Darren Parkin across our channel as
He's
always.
got man flu though.
That wraps
He's got man flu though. He may not survive. It could be fatal.
Big thank you to Strepsils and Lemsip for putting me through today's episode.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, fellas. And thank you for listening. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you next week.